Missouri Breaks National Monument protects 149 miles of the Missouri River, which here is a national wild and scenic river. President Thomas Jefferson ordered a military expedition, the Corps of Discovery, to explore the land between the Mississippi River and the Atlantic Ocean. So from 1803 to 1806, Captain Meriwether Lewis and Captain William Clark led the expedition. The term breaks refers to a series of badlands with rock outcroppings, steep cliffs, and grassy plains. We began in Fort Benton, Montana, camping at the canoe camp. Across the wide Missouri. We begin our journey at River Mile 0, Fort Benton, first passing their lovely riverfront park. And we're heading to River Mile 149 within the Charles Russell National Wildlife Refuge, specifically the Kipp Recreation Area. Just for my true love to see. Montana River ecosystem supports 60 species of animals, 233 bird species and 49 species of fish, and 20 of amphibians. Here's a bald eagle up in the tree, and here's an osprey catching a fish. Unfortunately, for many decades, 10,000 head of cattle have been grazing in a long-standing lease agreement with the Bureau of Land Management, and they have nearly obliterated the 5 indigenous species of woody shrubs and also the indigenous riverside cottonwood trees, thus eliminating food and shelter for the birds and mammals. And to provide sanitary camping areas, they've had to put barbed wire fences around many of the campsites, some of which are even electrified by solar energy. A mile downriver from here, Wood Bottom, is the confluence with the Marias River. In this photo from up on the bluff, it's obvious that to the left is the smaller Marias River and to the right is the larger Missouri River. But when Lewis and Clark were here in 1805, the Marias River was muddy and swollen from spring runoff, and thus it appeared that the Missouri actually went to the left, heading north. They spent 10 days here exploring up both rivers and finally made the correct choice. So this area is now called Decision Point. Coalbank's Landing got its name from the dark layer of lignite coal in the hillsides. Coalbank's Landing is mile 52, about a third of the way into our journey, and about 10 miles further on tomorrow, and we're going to start hitting the most scenic section of the Missouri River, called the White Cliffs, so named for the white sandstone. Captain Meriwether Lewis wrote in his journal that this White Cliffs area provided scenes of visionary enchantment, and I agree. Near Eagle Creek, we stopped and had lunch at Neal Coulee, which means dry creek. This is a unique area. You hike up to a slot canyon, hike into it a ways, and it branches right and left. We followed the right fork and took it all the way until we were out of the slot canyon. Then we turned to our left, bushwhacked up the hillside to get to the top where we could look down on it. Here we're zooming in on where the Y intersection is, and heading up to the top is where you would get to the river. We spent 2 hours exploring this area, and this is by far my favorite place on the river. This is an igneous dike, magma from the Earth's core that extruded up through a crack. Lewis likened these to walls of ancient houses. Citadel rock is an igneous intrusion into a layer of sandstone that washed away, leaving the harder basalt still standing. Hole-in-the-wall campsite was at mile 63. And this area provided one of the finest glimpses into life along the river 100+ years ago. The next day, after we packed up and continued our journey, we actually got to see a little closer view of the namesake hole-in-the-wall. Lewis and Clark had 13 campsites on this 149-mile stretch of the upper Missouri, a number of which are currently designated as campsites and identified with markers if you should happen to choose one. The Seven Sisters Formation is one of my favorites. It is created out of Eagle sandstone. The lead sister is called Sister Superior, with the other 6 nuns following. This has been named the Archangel. And as you continue down the river, you can let your imagination go to work and come up with appropriate names for many of those unnamed formations you'll see. In case you're curious, the washroom is always set up in a private location with a beautiful view of the river. And we just had to explore this huge mud cave that had formed. The 149-mile stretch only has 2 bridges over it, but there are 2 ferries also. Our 5th night we camped at McGarry Bar, about 2/3 of the way down the river. We assumed the bar referred to a sandbar years and years ago because we couldn't find an actual tavern anywhere. In fact, the only sign of civilization is back 15 miles at Judith Landing, where there is a store with limited goods and hours. We stopped for lunch at mile 113 at Cabin Rapids. In 1922, Irvin Smith filed homestead papers on 149 acres here, and with his brother Arnold, they raised corn, alfalfa, and hogs. See what this high desert environment has done to the roof? We camped that night at Gist Homestead along Bullwhacker Creek. This 320-acre spread was first settled by John Irvin around 1899 with 150 head of Percheron draft horses and 25 herd of cattle, and he lived alone here. In the 1930s, the Sanfords bought this parcel, and then after them, the Gist family, and they farmed and ranched here until 1980 when the Bureau of Land Management bought the land. Very deluxe outhouse because it's a two-seater. Around this bend is our final destination, the James Kipp Recreation Area, and our takeout. Here's all the gear packed up and ready for our transport back to Fort Benton. And here's our intrepid crew, finished with the 149-mile canoe journey. If you too would like to participate in this adventure and enjoy all these wonderful sights, head on over to Greg's site at adventuresinflorida.com. It's a wonderful week on the water.